Hello, and welcome to my first EJ the Realm Reviewer video. When I first made that title, I did not realize how much of a tongue twister that was going to be, but it's too late now. There's no turning back. My main channel has to do with comic books, EJ the Collector, as you can see behind me. But this channel is going to be dedicated to my novel reading and the reviews of the various novels that I'm reading. The one we're talking about today is Exodus, the Archimedes Engine. So real quick, I just want to mention, since this is the first video I'm posting to the channel, I'm going to be reading all kinds of books on this channel. That's why it's called the Realm Reviewer. I didn't want to narrowly say I'm only going to be doing a certain kind of book, but mostly sci-fi and fantasy. Another book that you'll probably see a review on here for is the Dungeon Crawler series. Definitely some Warhammer 40k stuff. In fact, a lot of Warhammer 40k books are going to be reviewed on here. So if you're into this universe and you want to get my take on it, I'm also in the process of building my first army for Warhammer 40k. And then like another fantasy book, like I read the first book in the Wheel of Time series. So that's another one that, these are the styles of book I'm going to read. I'm also working on Brandon Sanderson books and other books I have from this author of the one we're going to talk about today. So anyway, all that aside, let's get into Exodus, right? The Archimedes Engine. So this book was incredible. One of my favorite sci-fi reads in a long time. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about this book. Number one, it is tied to a video game that's coming out in early 2027 called Exodus. The thing about that is, if you knew nothing about the fact that this was tied to a video game and you just looked at this as a standalone sci-fi novel, it's still just as incredible. In fact, I would recommend this book to people that aren't even into video games at all. People that just like good sci-fi books, I would for sure recommend you this book. Now let's talk about the author, Peter F. Hamilton. He's an award-winning British author who's written some great books like the Commonwealth Saga, the Void Trilogy. Some of his earlier stuff was called Fear Magazine or Mindstar Rising. He's an incredible sci-fi author. And I got to say, after reading this, the guy's a genius. Let me just start right off the bat with general stuff about this book that I really like, and then we'll get into the premise. One of the things I like about this book is that it comes together in a very clever way at the end. So I read different styles of books for different reasons, right? With the Warhammer 40k books, those are almost like, they're like action novels. There's war and don't get me wrong, there can be some really clever stuff in there, especially if you're reading something like Dan Abnett or Chris Wright, right? Those authors are great. But to me, those are more like an action-packed, fun adventure, where this book is an action-packed, fun adventure, but it's more intellectual. And I would almost say that it's kind of like... That's the other thing I want to say is it's like you're watching a movie when you're reading this book, because the way it's written and the perspectives it gives and the pacing, and the author does an incredible job of tying everything together in the end. And that's what I was kind of trying to say is like different books have different strengths. The Warhammer 40k books or the Dungeon Crawler books, the Dungeon Crawler book is definitely like a book that's has some very heartfelt moments and some very funny moments and some very crazy action. The Wheel of Time book, the first one that I just showed, is like a classic, fantasy adventure. This book is a sci-fi book that everything is so cleverly written, and the ending makes use of these plot points that the author has built up over the course of the book for it all to culminate in this. First of all, there's a really good twist too, but it all culminates in an ending where it does set up for the next book, but the main character is able to utilize a lot of the things that, have been set up earlier in the book to do something spectacular at the end. And I think that he, did an incredible job planning this. But yeah, the book is amazing. I guess I'm holding this up the whole video because I just want it on camera, whatever. But to summarize, cleverly written, the author is like a genius. The ending comes together in such a great, satisfying way. And it's like watching a movie when you read this. The pacing is incredible. So now let's talk about the premise, okay? So here's the premise. I'm going to try to get this as correct as I can. But correct me in the comments if I say anything wrong here. It was a while ago that I read this book, although I did do a refresher. Basically, old Earth has been abandoned because of various different reasons. It's not inhabitable anymore. And arcs are created by humans that are sent out into the galaxy to try to find habitable worlds. Some of the arcs are made by just rich people. Some of the arcs are, specific people are selected to go on them based on if they're going to be good for society. And only certain people get to go on the arcs. But many, many arcs go out looking for habitable worlds. And most don't find any. But the idea is that when habitable worlds are found, a signal will be sent out that the rest of the arcs can, receive and then head towards where the signal originated. Well, the first ships to arrive at habitable worlds arrive in the systems that are in this book, and they send out the signal to the rest of the arcs. Some of the arcs have gone in the complete opposite direction of where these worlds were found. Some of them are going all different directions looking for habitable worlds. And the thing that's important to note about this book, and it's very, very cool what the author does, is that there's no faster than light travel in this book. So if you're going to travel to something that's 1,000 light years away, it will take you 1,000 years relative, right, to get there. That being said, usually you're not traveling that far away in this book. Usually it's like, 20 light years away or something where you're going. But also there's time dilation, right? So when you're traveling, and this is a real thing in science fiction, by the way, when you're traveling very, very close to the speed of light, let's say 99.9999 to the speed of light, you experience less time than people left behind on a planet that you leave, right? On Earth or wherever. So what happens is the arcs go out, thousands of years pass. The first arcs, find habitable worlds and start to colonize them and start to advance their technology and enhance their bodies and their genetics, right? Using bioengineering. And they evolve into basically almost a new species of human called the Celestials. And they create all this incredible technology, and there's these gates that allow you to travel quickly between the different planets that they've colonized. And there's a whole thing about that. I won't go into all the explanation there, but there's these stasis engines and stuff. And that gets, used throughout the book. Again, very, very, very cleverly. The world that this author builds is insanely detailed and makes a lot of sense. And it comes together in such a great way at the ending. I can't emphasize that enough. So it's great to hang in there for the whole book. It's worth it. But yeah, they build up all this technology. They send out the habitable worlds signal. Then arcs that were, some of them traveling completely in the opposite direction, start to show up. And by the time they get there, though, thousands of years have passed for the people that got there originally and started colonizing. So they are super advanced and they're beyond normal humans. And the normal humans that show up are basically subjugated, or, they're looked at as less. And a war breaks out. And then the humans end up getting relegated to abandoned worlds and worlds that no one else wanted. And they're treated as second-class citizens, and the Celestials kind of rule over them. And everything in the book, though, all the creatures and all the different types of humanoid creatures and stuff, are all the results of genetic modifications made to things that came from Earth. So it's not really aliens, right? They're not aliens. It's just super advanced civilizations from Earth. And what's crazy about this book, so it follows a couple different characters. There's different classes of humans. Some of the humans are a class of human that have been somewhat genetically enhanced so that they can use some celestial technology, and they're kind of the stewards of the Celestials. They kind of help the Celestials manage the human worlds, and they're a step between Celestial and humans. It follows one of those people is the main character. It follows some regular humans that arrive. It's the latest arriving arc, right? That gets there. An arc hasn't arrived in a really long time, but this arc had been going the complete different direction, and it shows up in the system, and we get the perspective of those people from the arc as well. And the book follows these characters, and the main character will go, going back to the time dilation, he'll go to a system that's very far away that maybe takes 10 years to travel to, right? It's 10 light years away. and then he'll travel back and his family will have aged 20 years. And it's still, even though the story in this book takes place over decades, it's still one long cohesive story. And the way the author writes it, he doesn't make it hard to keep track of, okay, when is this all happening in respect to each other? Because like I said, with the time dilation and with the traveling, at near light speed, some characters experience very little time, and some characters that are just sitting on a planet at home, age a lot during the course of other characters going out and doing kind of adventurous things. And it's so masterfully told that it does not get confusing. And it is one cohesive story that spans all these decades and has all these planets. It also follows a celestial that I don't want to give away any spoilers on this, but the perspective of the celestial is really good as well, because you understand, the culture of these celestials that have been here, the ones that arrived first and have been here for thousands of years. What have they evolved into, and what is their society like? That is another perspective you get in this book. So if you are excited for this video game, I think this is a perfect companion piece. And like I said, it's a good book even as a standalone book, regardless of whether or not there's going to be a video game. The video game that's going to come out is a spiritual successor to Mass Effect. And Mass Effect people love, and it was a space opera, right? And Mass Effect was heavily, based, like its main thing was its story. Yes, it was a, space, adventure game where you're fighting people and shooting lasers and there's different aliens and stuff. But the main, thing that people loved about Mass Effect was the story that gets told throughout the game, and your different choices in the game of Mass Effect change the ending and change what happens in your story. I'm from what I've seen so far about Exodus, that the video game is going to be very much similar to that. This book sets up the world of the video game, but the characters in it aren't necessarily going to be in the video game. This is its own standalone thing that happens in the universe. Some of the Celestials, I think, may show up in the game, but I think most of the human characters aren't going to show up in the video game, which is fine. I keep saying this, but it's such a good standalone sci-fi book that I'm actually happy they decided to keep it somewhat separate from the game. And at the same time, they set up the game wonderfully. And the setting here is really important. You really understand the setting that the game takes place in, which is very complex. So it's great to read this book first, because you're going to understand the world so much more. So, in conclusion, this book was incredible. I recommend it to everybody that likes sci-fi books. I bought Peter F. Hamilton. I bought some of his other novels because this one was so good that I was like, I got to read more by this guy. I haven't read them yet because I have so many things in my backlog, of things to read. But, I will get to them. I have the Commonwealth Saga. That's what I have right now that I'm going to get into soon. The next book for this comes out. When does it come out? In June, I want to say. And it's called The Helium Sea, Exodus, The Helium Sea. It's coming out in a month or two. The volume 2, which I'm definitely going to pick up, and I definitely can't wait to read that one, because that's going to have a great conclusion to this whole epic that began in this book. So that's why I'm doing this review right now, because we are right about to see the release of volume 2, and this is one of the books that I read when I first got back into reading novels, and I'm happy that I did read this book, because it really reminded me how great novels are. I read so many novels growing up as a kid, and then throughout high school and over my life, and I hadn't read them for a while because I had mostly focused on comics. But I got back into novel reading, and I've read a bunch of novels now, and this was the first one I read, and I'm super happy this was my choice, because this was so great. And yeah, I want to know in the comments if you've read this book, if something like this would interest you. Are you anticipating the video game that's going to come out? Is that something that is on your radar at all? Or is this the first time you're hearing of this? Let me know all your thoughts on everything I talked about in this video in the comments, and look for more videos on this channel of book reviews coming soon. Also, let me know if there's anything that you want to see me review as well. So yeah, thanks for watching.